Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It is I, Emily Sophia, aka Mighty Sophia, here to break down for you all the finale episode of the penultimate season of Bates Motel. We are on season 4, episode 10, Norman. Norman. So, spoiler alert before I dive into the mad thick of things, as I shall be endeavoring to bear all in this review. Once again, I am in a state of complete and utter emotional compromise and turmoil and despair and joy because I know that we have a final fantastic season coming, that there's more of the story yet to tell. But in the meantime, I am still very much going through the mourning period. And at this point, I'm going to tell all y'all who have not seen the show, who are interested, who are not caught up in this episode, please save yourselves the wicked surprises. Check them out for yourself. And now the rest of us, let us hash out this business together. Now, I do want to tell you to stick around if you can, if you got the time. I know this is a long video, but if you can stick it out to the end, I do want to talk about the show's future prospects because I just read a couple of interviews with one of the executive producers of the show discussing the direction in which things are going to be going in the 5th season. And it's very revealing and very shocking, and there are things that I had no idea about. Not huge spoilers, just in terms of what is the show's endgame. We now got a picture of that. But in the meantime, we have a relentlessly beautiful and breathtaking and insane episode on our hands. And I actually had the honor and the privilege of watching it with my mother, who is such a wonderful commentator. Yes, she had a proclivity for making light of a lot of the darker situations. You know, whenever there was a scene where Norman is touching the deceased vacated body of Norma, she's like, oh, she'd be stiffer than that. Oh, she's still got such a great complexion. She really should be a little more gray than that. And so these were the comments that I was getting in the seat next to me. But I love my mom, and hey, we get to watch a crazy show about the love of a mom, so how freaking special is that? And Norman even got a little bit of couch time with Norma this evening as well. So I guess he and I are both gonna end up on the therapist's couch, perhaps. But man, once again, I am actually slightly more recovered before this review, but I cried at several points in this episode. I attribute it fully to the brilliance that is embodied in every performance by Freddie Highmore, who has completely assimilated himself into the psycho character portrayed by Anthony Perkins in decades past. And yet we are also passing into new territory where the story is being retold and different elements are being shifted, and now everything is moving in this fresh direction where we're not simply moving into a retread of Psycho. We have these completely take this euphemism as you shall, but these very fleshed out characters, and having to lose the character of Norma Bates in this show is just devastating. And I felt that loss washing over me and sweeping over me with every instant, and to see all of the phases of grief that Norman moves through as he tries to actually induce his psychosis such that he can undo death and bring himself out of the abyss where his mother isn't, and into the place where they are to be together. You know, I think of that beautiful scene at the beginning of the episode where we're looking down at Norman as he is in the ambulance, and these flashing intense red and blues from the emergency lights that are cast on him, contrasted with the warmth and of this summery, sweet memory of his mother, and how they're chasing one another. and even Norman as a little boy is distraught by the idea that his mother would actually leave him, or that he might lose her. And she says, no, it's just a game. I'm always going to be here. Don't you know that? And then finally, by the end, just when it seems that all hope is lost and Norman feels like it's not even just about joining his mother anymore. When he puts that gun in his mouth, it's about putting an end to himself, because the weight of what he has done, the weight of his error, completely smothers him and destroys him and tears him from the inside out. But then all of a sudden, he hears "I'll be home for Christmas" on the piano, and it's all back to, well, the new era has begun. I think that this episode is called Norman because this is about the death of Norman. We have now, we lost Norma in the last episode, and now we lose Norman Bates as we once knew him, and find in his place a new incarnation that is fused to Mother. And it's huge stuff. It's so, I shudder to see, Norma is back in this little Santa's helper suit, and the entire house and the motel decked out in Christmas lights. And oh gosh, as we pull back through the window and we see Norman laying his head on Mother's shoulder, and we know that yes, they will indeed always be together. And that's the crux of the problem, because that's going to spell out a little bit of bloodshed further down the line. In fact, when you think about it, if you want to twist this festive Christmas imagery a wee bit, the red embodies the passion of Mother, the illicit passions, we shall say, as she is going to compel Norman to do reprehensible things. And it also, I think, represents, the blood that shall spill forth from perhaps the veins of a certain Marion Crane, if I'm recalling the name correctly. The classic Once Upon a Time damsel in distress from Psycho. But more on that subject later, ladies and gents. But yeah, do a little bit of color analysis, and there's lots to be discovered in this episode. But I think that what was perhaps one of the most powerful parts of the episode for me, even beyond the crazy funeral scenario and Norman's grave digging escapades, the way that he's tossing Norma's body around, oh god. But I earlier into the episode, when he is flushing his medications down the toilet, I think this is also around the time that Juno, his taxidermized dog, comes back into the picture. That might be shortly before or after, I don't quite remember. But he is convincing himself that he is going to go forward with their plan, he and Norma's plan of always being together. And the only way that he can do that is by altering the course of reality, is by allowing himself to be sick, allowing there to be something wrong with him. Because, if not taking his meds is wrong and also doesn't bring Norma back, then he doesn't want to be right. And this is something I actually tweeted out earlier, that whole everything that Norman does, the way that he searches his house and looks around corners, and he keeps the lights off a lot of the times. You'll notice there's lots of shadows, lots of natural light. He's trying to give himself opportunities to rediscover Norma, for her to come out of the shadows and back into his reality, into his presence, and into his heart. And it's sort of like if you've ever lucid dreamed, tried to transport yourself from a normal dream into a lucid state where you can control things, you have to manipulate your environment. You have to get yourself to think in weird, outlandish, and creative ways. And that's something that Norman is trying so desperately to do. And so as I begin to think of, I am actually a very avid lucid dreamer. I don't know if I've ever spoken about that in my previous reviews, but that's what it makes me think of. Something that I have done for years, ever since I was a little girl, something I've done in my lucid dreams is I try to find people. There was once a friend of mine who lived on the other side of the world, and I would often try to dream him into existence. If I was in a dream state where I could make that happen, I would search and I would look and I would try to get this person to materialize. And so it makes me think of that process for Norman as he is pushing himself to new extremes. He is trying to beckon Mother back to him. He even feels after the funeral that he's being punished for what he's done. He feels the guilt of their separation, knowing that he came so close to doing what he thought was best for them and then completely slipped up and was spun in a new direction. And he's thinking, okay, I just need to trust. I need to have faith, faith, trust, pixie dust, and a little bit of murder. Something like that, And oh gosh, it's just madness. And as we see him trying to process things as he's trying to function for the rest of the world, we often see an angry and belligerent side of him that arises. Behind closed doors, he is in tears. He is trembling and convulsing and bubbling over. But then we see him as he first encounters the detective who is on the case of Norma's death and comes to visit him as he is removing one final installment of Alex Romero that has been haunting his lovely abode, the giant flat screen TV. And so, he's dropping it like it's hot. And then the two of them end up having a discussion as he's going to make the exclusive funeral arrangements for his mother. There are to be no other guests besides him. It's almost kind of like a seance, minus the dark magic to bring her back. But anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. So we see that he tries to process things in ways that I think make sense to many of us who have endured loss in our own lives, as he picks out this freaking fairy tale purple dress for Norma, and he's like, I could never have imagined myself doing this. It's something that's so candid and just resonates so much. And then, there's other facets of him that come forward that are a little bit perhaps different than you and I might think. But nonetheless, his Freddie Highmore's performance is such a colorful tapestry. No one single moment looks like the next. He is constantly shifting gears. He is constantly trying to process, trying to seek, and just filled to the brim and exploding with yearning. And you can see that so powerfully, especially in these last few episodes of the season. I continue to be ridiculously impressed. But all of this, of course, leads us up to the fateful funeral encounter. Which, so a lot of people are starting to predict that, I believe Sable is the name of the goth-looking mortician girl. I do suspect that she is probably going to be a repeat character. You don't bring in a character like that, with the makeup and everything. It's like, I don't think that they're just throwing that in there for the hell of it. I think very much that they are intentionally planting her here and introducing her for the final season, and that perhaps she could even be sort of that a friend figure to Norman, much like Emma was to him in the previous seasons, and now, you know, it's time for him to maybe hang out and get to know somebody who looks a little bit like death itself. I don't know. She might have a little bit of insight into him. But anyway, so that freaking funeral speech, am I right? Norman goes from 0 to 60. It's just this sweet, you know, he says something that he has said in different but similar ways in times past. He says, you know, that my mother was the most wonderful person who ever lived. You know, and he says that she was like a queen and a little girl. Now that's a juxtaposition you don't often get in a love letter to your mother, but Norman's got a very special perspective on the beauty of Norma Bates, and even proceeds to say that she's a miracle. But for all the planning that he put into his departure with Norma, she was taken away from him as if by some kind of divine intervention. And so in this church that is covered in plumes of flowers, you know, and the ridiculous like carnival organ music, everything feels so obscene and out of place, and Norman kind of starts to rage against the machine, against God himself, and against the shit that he now has to put himself through in Norma's absence, and the priest has to, you know, come and try and shut him down. He digresses, he goes back to trying to say, you know, we must trust God, there is a plan, and as he goes forth into all this religiosity, that is, of course, when freaking Alex Romero shows up, and he is out for blood. At this point, it's not about justice. It's not about doing things through the system that he has worked with as sheriff for all these years. Yeah, he's a dirty cop, and he dirties his hands a little bit more as he proceeds to, you know, deck the halls of Norman's face in the church and knock him clean over into a pew. It's brutal stuff, and I couldn't help but be absolutely livid at that moment, because it's like, dude, give Norman his freaking creepy chance to have this, like, you know, date with death and his mother. Like, there's already 3 of us here. I think you need to go. But at the same time, we also are invited to see Romero's love for Norma on numerous occasions, and still, I mean, from my perspective, it pales in comparison to what Norma and Norman have had going on. And the way that these two men demonize each other, I mean, it all goes back to just how wonderful and enchanting and just rapturous the character of Norma Bates was and is and will forever be. So whatever side of things, whatever side of the spectrum you lay on, be it Romero's or Norman's, I mean, the central figure here that is driving these men to utter madness is Norma. And that's just how freaking great she is, you know? But now I'm starting to suspect that since Romero's been imprisoned, he's going to maybe play a pretty major part in the end game of the show. And a question that I'm starting to wonder is Romero going to get his revenge by the end? Is that the direction that things are going? I can't be sure, but he gets nailed on a perjury charge. He's gonna be out at some point. They caught him with a gun. He's gonna go straight back to the bullet business, and I think that he's gonna be ready to rip Norman a new one once he is on the other side of the clink. But Now, from my understanding, Dylan doesn't know that Norma has passed either, right? Because from their conversation, they're kind of tiptoeing around the issue. Norman doesn't want to have to dwell on Norma's death any more than he has to, because he is actually in the process of trying to make sure that he can ferry her back to the land of the living. So the more lip service that he has to pay to Norma's death, the more I think that he fears he'll lose her. And so he tries to shove Dylan away entirely, because he knows that the presence of his brother is going to break the illusion, and that this bond is more powerful than any other familial bond that he could have on this earth. So it's really tragic, and it really sucks, and we know that Dylan is going to get wrapped all back up in this very soon. Seattle is not going to be enough to hold him. He's going to start pursuing answers, and it's gonna take him all back, and everything's gonna suck for him. But I think that is the inevitable pull, and it seems like the showrunners are indicating that, yeah, he's gonna continue to be involved in a big way in the days to come. But I do want to end this review by really breaking down that final scene, the final scenes rather, as Norman drags Norma from the cold embrace of the earth, and thinks that the only way that he can force Norma to come back is by retrieving her body. And it's not even so much that, because he tells her, like, you can wake up now. You can stop kidding around. You can stop, you've rolled over, you've played dead, you really had them all fooled, okay? Now it's time for you to wake up, because you're safe, you're with me. And so the final reversal, where he glues her eyes open and is stuck staring into these dead, lifeless, clouded marbles, not marvels. And it all comes to a screeching halt, everything that he's been working towards. And then that abrupt confrontation with Chick as well, the whole, your mom's dead, right? And now, of course, you gotta contrast the eyeball scene with Norma at the end from the scene where she opens her pretty little baby blues at the mortician's station. And that's when Norman slips the ring off of her finger and tells her that he's gonna, finish what they started, or start what they finished, however you want to look at it. But yeah, that contrast is just, it's so jarring, the way that she's just like, whoa, like staring back at him with nothing to offer, with no response. And Norman is so horrified by this. And then, he gets the casserole from Chick, who only means well. I mean, the guy really should figure that an open door at the Bates residence isn't what you think it is, but I mean, dude, it's bad. It's a bad situation. God bless his little heart, but goodness gravy, did he almost, end up having his own untimely end. But all of that comes to a cataclysmic realization in Norman's mind that everything is wrong, and that Norma truly is gone. But then, cue the music, and we, ladies and gents, are in the Psycho era now. Now that I say that, I need to say that I read a couple of articles saying that, yes, in fact, the 5th season is going to overlap with and put a new spin on the events of Psycho. So I thought originally that the show was going to bring us up to the point, or in the final episode, Marion would be coming to book her reservation at the motel, and that it would be this dun dun dun, but they are actually going to do their own rendition of that story. And so, think on all these characters, anything could happen at this point. Anybody could live, anybody could die. They're not just going to be retreading the same territory. It sounds like they are doing their very own adaptation and essentially retelling, one that fits with this modern universe, and I guess with the conception of Norman Bates as, you know, the younger version that we see him as in this show. So not like adult Anthony Perkins status, but I mean, I think it makes so much sense that they would go this way and this soon. I get it, because I mean, now that we have laid Norma to rest and we are bringing Mother to the forefront of this business, they gotta ramp things up. You know, they gotta take this intensity through to the end, and it sounds like they are going to do just that. And that, yes, Marion Crane is going to be a character in the final season. So now, of course, there's speculation as to who is going to play her, how all of that is going to go down, but my freaking goodness, what an amazing season it has been. I can't thank all of you enough for coming with me on this journey. I love this show, have loved it since the very beginning, and may Norma Bates forever be in our hearts. She is the cord between our hearts, I dare say. So you guys are wonderful, miraculous human beings. If there's anything that I missed, anything you want to expand on further, I'd be happy to talk with you guys in the comments. It was such a pleasure to do so over the past week. So I will still be here. I'll still be reviewing Game of Thrones and bringing in some new content, and also thanking all of you for helping me break 10,000 subscribers. Big thank you videos coming soon. So you guys take care. And as always, I will be back before you know it.